A strike can be a good example for applying what you've learned in this course. One of the things that you learned in this course is to notice all of the costs involved to a certain decision, not just what is said and what is visible, including the unintended consequences, for instance, and also how to look at it rationally. When there's a strike, there are a lot of hard emotions. So one of the things that you learned is trying to see the incentives involved without the emotional drag. So I'll give you a little simple background. Unions are basically interest groups with shared concentrated benefits, and their incentive is to get together to pursue their joint interest. And that would give them monopoly power. Um, the main bargaining weapon of a union is strike, which means the threat of withholding their service. Now, in the case of public sector unions, like teacher unions, basically what you have is they're negotiating with public administration. So you have government employees on one side and government employees on the other side. Both are government employees. And what we have is limited funds, and that's the tax revenue. So the government's tax revenue, they're basically trying to settle how to split the same purse. All right. So they're fighting over the same source of revenue, which doesn't belong to any of them. It's the tax, it's at the expense of the taxpayers. Now, something that's useful is think of this metaphor. What happens when parents fight? If two parents fight, who is the victim? The children. Now, maybe one parent is being unreasonable, unfair, and cruel, but in any fight between the parents, the first victims are the children. And the parents in this case, they don't even get divorced because they think they're doing the kids a favor. Now, of course, the parents would always justify it for themselves by saying, oh, I'm fighting for my children. And maybe that's true in some cases, but in the case of the unions and the ministry, they can never have the same compassion and self-sacrifice of the parents. They rather pursue their own self-interest in the guise of public interest and use the children as a means to advocate their agenda. And their rhetoric is also very interesting. It's always us, the teachers, versus them, the administration, the ministry, right? So that's the fight we're talking about, and you're the main victims of it, unfortunately. Now, what is the teachers' incentives? The incentive of the teachers is basically protection and benefits, right? That's what they're looking for. And the union actually gives them a lot of protection. And the ministry's incentive is to save on costs and also keep the taxpayers happy. This is now the ministry cannot hire others because the unions have eliminated competition because of the mandatory membership laws. So this is a great example of rent seeking. Remember, rent seeking, it means gaining more benefits, not because they are more productive and innovative, but because they have no competitors, because they are a monopoly, right? And if you get into unions, there is this huge emotional charge in their meetings. A lot of times there is a lot of stimulation of the members emotionally. Reason and logic don't really have much place in union meetings. And also they view all events with a lot of suspicion. They're intent on opposing any change, any reform, and they tend to be quite aggressive. All right. Why? Because they feel that they're being attacked. Let me say this in brackets. Whenever you see aggression, remember that it is because the person feels insecure. There is fear behind aggression. And that's why the aggressive person deserves compassion. They think they can't compete, so they resort to force in order to secure themselves. 7 years ago, I got into the union for one term, and it was unbearable. I was the skunk in their garden party. They were like, how did this guy infiltrate into us? And of course, I never got in again, not because they didn't want me, but because I was fed up. Such a waste of time. If you want to have an efficient life, avoid unions at all expenses. Now, let me also say this. I know all the people working at the Dawson Teacher Union, and they're all very good people. They're much more decent than me. Well, that's not a great achievement, but still. So this is not to question or doubt even a bit the personalities involved or their intentions. There is no malevolence, but there is ignorance, and ignorance calls for compassion. So let me show you some of the things that's going on right now in terms of the rhetoric. So here's the Dawson Teachers Union website with this strike picture. And what we have here is something called withholding final grades. So teachers across the CEGEP network are being urged to withhold their final grades until the grade deadline. This is intended as an additional tactic to pressure the government to settle our demands. Again, what you see is it's not a whole picture. It's us versus them. And maybe their demands are legitimate. They have their own arguments, and that's fine. But it's not the whole picture. It doesn't reflect all of the costs involved. And I would say the greatest cost involved is you guys, the students and the families, and how it affects you. And there is nothing of that at the forefront of the discussions. They have also developed a whole bunch of these backgrounds that you might have seen from some of your teachers in the in Zoom, just to kind of show their point. The night and day difference of wage, again, that could be a valid point, but actually you guys can answer it based on compensating differentials. So you can see that they're spending a lot of time creating these resources, whereas they could have spent this time improving their pedagogy and doing their job. This is called rent seeking. Again, the resources are being spent in a way that would secure them some privileged position through these posters and these activities, as opposed to being competitive and more productive. And they also had this this file. Again, some of you might have seen it, just to basically state their position. We've been talking about the public services, whatever. We do this to contribute to Quebec's development. So a comment I have here is development stems from innovation, not lobbying. So that's a fallacy there. And they're talking about how they include the teachers, elementary schools, high school teachers, support staff, healthcare professionals, nurses also, and in total they're 500,000. So that is a good example of concentrated benefits. So that is public choice theory. We have been at the table with the government for over 18 months. So this is bureaucratic cost where neither side is concerned with competition, right? Both sides have monopoly powers. This government seems to respond only to threats. Well, anyone with monopoly power does so. They become rigid because they don't have competitors. And despite our hesitation, we might go and strike. If we do so, we would take no pleasure in it. Now, I have a problem with that. This is called mauvaise foi by Jean-Paul Sartre, which is when you deny your own responsibility, and it's called self-deception. So people have voted for this, 79% at Dawson and a lot of these institutions. So let's not deny our own responsibility. Would like to improve our working condition, which is your learning condition. Again, this is a fallacy. If these demands are really for the interest of the consumers or the households, how come they are never on the forefront of the negotiations? Are the service providers more caring about the recipients than the recipients themselves? This is a good yardstick. See in any kind of negotiation, see who is pushing for it. How come there is never the households there? It's always the unions. It shows where the interest is going and where the interest lies. So again, you see not a full picture and being very biased and dishonest with how things are presented. Investing in education is investing in the future. This is why we are demanding better funds for our CEGEP. So investing in education, well, this is not investing in education. If it lowers the accountability of teachers. What this is getting more privilege for the teachers, which is going to reduce by reducing their competition, and there's going to be less accountability. And by the way, there is no free lunch. You guys know that already. This is a collective struggle. So we are pushing for the public services, and it's all for the public. It's all for the general good, right? Again, this is a fallacy. This is a cover-up. You're at most concerned with one subset of the public, which is yourselves, at the expense of others. So stop lying. So again, you have to be very critical of this kind of rhetoric that goes along. This is highly emotional and very biased, and it never captures the whole picture, including the unintended consequences, especially for you who are claimed to be the real beneficiaries of it. No one even asks for your vote. All right, now we can play this blame game as much as we want, but let's get a little bit more practical, and let's also be a bit critical of ourselves. Let's see how this all affects you. Some of you, when you heard about this strike, some of you were like, yes, we get 2 days off. But is that really in your advantage? They're going to extend the term without any consultation or vote from you. And that can disturb all your schedule. Maybe you had schedules for the summer. Maybe you had scheduled for work and for your graduation, for your admissions. So the thing is that your opinion doesn't matter at all. It's really like the case of the parents fighting. And what about your plans? All of the plans that you had and your choice. In this case, when you have this paternalistic education system, basically your choice doesn't matter whatsoever. But there's more than that. Let's just rewind and look at it more generally. What is your benefit anyway? Often, when your classes get canceled, you're like, yes, I have no class. And that's understandable in the short run, but is that really your long-term benefit? And how do you assess your teachers? A lot of times, the vision that you have is that a good teacher is one whose course is easy, who doesn't give much work, and who ends class early. You're gonna like it when your teachers end class early. If that's really what you want, then why are you even a student? It's kind of like this. Imagine that you order something online and they charge your card, but then they don't deliver. Would you say, yes, it didn't deliver? Would you feel like you won? Or are you being ripped off? That's exactly the same when your teachers don't deliver what they're supposed to deliver to you, right? So when they let you go early consistently, not just once or twice, but as a routine. So they're not doing you a service. Also, ask yourselves, how much accountability do your teachers have? They're always demanding more and complaining about their conditions, but you are the best judges to tell if they deserve more. Think about the pedagogical approach of each of your teachers. How deep and advanced is it? Is it based on rote learning or independent thinking? Do they throw content at you and ask you to regurgitate it in a test? Or do they open your eyes to new ways of seeing and assessing the world? How punctual are your teachers in their preparation, in their feedback, and in their grading? Are they organized? Are they proficient with the technology which is part of their service? And is there any accountability about these aspects of their job? They have total autonomy to deliver any kind of service that they want. So these are things to think about. And then a lot of times they're not doing these things which you're supposed to do. And then they still ask for more and they put their resources into mobilizing and striking. That's questionable. And what is saddest of all is that we have got desensitized to this as a society. The teachers don't see themselves accountable. The administration doesn't bother. And even the parents and students, the recipients of the service, the taxpayers who pay for it, no one cares. We're all like, yeah, what are you going to do about it? You know, we think that that's how it is and there is no other alternative. So we have lost even our imagination. That's why it doesn't even bother us when there is a strike. We're all like, this is the workers' right. But how come when a firm becomes a monopoly, it's against the law, but when the workers become a monopoly, it's their right? And at what expense? We even take pride in it. Let's stand in solidarity for one another, as if solidarity is an intrinsic value, as if solidarity is an inherent virtue. What is solidarity? Solidarity in rent seeking, solidarity to be irresponsible, solidarity to plunder public funds, solidarity to shield the teachers against competition so that they have even less accountability and transparency. That's despicable. That's not solidarity. That's rigidity. Now I have another idea. How about less solidarity and more fluidity, more flexibility, more elasticity? And elasticity means having alternatives where everything is not determined paternalistically from above. What does solidarity mean anyway? Solidarity means concentration of power, forming a monopoly, except that this monopoly is legal and sounds innocent, but it's the same beast. How come we're so careful to prevent mergers and monopolies in other industries, but it's okay when the unions merge to lobby? Listen up. The mother of all evil is concentration of power, wherever it may be found. So now let's look at what the teachers and nurses saying. They claim that they're underpaid and treated unfairly. The ministry says no. And because both sides are powerful, they resort to violence. The decision to go on strike is a form of violence, without exaggeration. Well, no wonder it's called strike, duh. Now, we go around accusing those who commit physical violence, but we do the same thing in our own capacity. And who is doing it? Teachers and nurses who are supposed to be the models of selfless civic service. Is this the socialist utopia we were seeking, where millions of students and households are not even consulted about how their life is affected? This is exactly paternalism, where decisions are made by a big brother and you have to meet its consequences. You don't make the decisions, you don't have the choice, but you have to meet the consequences. Is this our socialist paradise, where we can't negotiate peacefully over a year until we go on strike, where going on strike is a frequent means of settling disputes? So here's another lesson. If we want to promote peace, we can't do it simply by praising it and talking about it. We need to get at the roots of violence. The root of our institutionalized conflicts is that we have no objective basis for fairness. Teachers and nurses say it's unfair. The ministry says it is fair. And who is it to settle a dispute? That's what happens when we make decisions paternalistically from above. The recipients will always feel underpaid because the decision making is arbitrary and subjective. So disagreement and violence are inevitable in a paternalistic top-down distribution, right? Now, what is the alternative? Well, how can we tell? How can we tell objectively whether someone is underpaid or not? And how can we avoid the concentration of power in the hands of unions? Here's a solution. Give choice to the households and let the teachers compete for their vote, for the vote of the households, by improving their service. Parents are the best people to choose for their children, right? Now, the reason why this would be a much improved system is that competition rewards productivity. It rewards those who provide what the people actually want, what they're willing to pay for. So in this way, it's going to create responsibility. Then your teachers won't go around offering poor pedagogy or handicapped technology, but they have the incentive to cater to your needs because you'll have a choice and they'll hear your voice. This will also remove the violence and conflict because the benefits are no longer given arbitrarily from above. Instead, they're given to those who provide quality service to the actual recipients. So why can't we be a little bit more creative? Why should we always assume that everything has to be done by a big brother? Now let's rewind a little bit. Why do we push for government provision to begin with? Well, the argument is that the private sector only cares about profit. They're basically a bunch of greedy pigs who only care about money and not the common good. So let's have the government provide the services. That would be more fair, more responsible, with higher quality, right? Now look at the results. I mean, we can go around and call anyone that we want a pig, but look at the result. Look at the results here. Look what happens. We are talking about teachers and nurses who are not profit driven, who are not business oriented, who have some of the most selfless jobs in the society. Yet see what we get. Still, we get self-interest. It's still self-interest which gets the upper hand. It's the same self-interest, but now with concentration of power. All right, now you're watching this, you might be like, hang on, why are you part of this education system which is so irresponsible and corrupt? It's hypocritical and inconsistent. It's also ungrateful because you're receiving a lot of rent being part of the union, then you go on ranting about it. So now what I would say is that that's a valid objection. And my best answer to that would be a quote by Schrödinger about quantum theory. I don't like it, and I'm sorry I ever had anything to do with it. Now, I'm not going to try to exonerate myself here. I don't think it's possible, and I don't think it's much useful for you either. But I'm going to share with you a couple of general insights. As a general rule, I think these are useful to know. First of all, this is far from perfect, but remember opportunity cost from the very first day. One of its implications is the fallacy of perfectionism. It's not enough to say that something is good or bad or beneficial or harmful. What matters is to choose the best alternative among the choices that are practically available to us. So look at the available options, and among those, you pick the best choice, even if the best alternative is far from perfect. All right, so that can be a useful guideline. Second point, when we have a corrupt system, getting out may not necessarily be better than staying in. Perhaps getting out could be irresponsible, right? Could be even more irresponsible. Why not try to be the exception in the system? Why not try to be an example to others? Why not strive to improve it? At the end of the day, the question is whether there is hope or not, right? Things are not perfect, but is there hope or not, regardless of how imperfect the system is? And as a teacher, I'm very optimistic, all right? Because education is the key to reform, but also keep in mind that any lasting reform is a gradual, long process, right? So as we criticize unions for being impatient and narrow in their view, the only way to counter that is that we maintain patience and a broad perspective. All right, so what do I want you to take out of all this mess? Two things. One, think. I don't want you to accept what I say. I want you to develop your own judgment, especially if you have other teachers who talked about this strike. Listen to them carefully. They're also intelligent, educated academics. Take their arguments seriously. Maybe they have a point. Ask your teachers if your relationship allows, how is their take on this strike? If you expose yourself to multiple opposing views, that's when you develop your thinking. And you won't end up with any of the positions, but your own original perspective. Okay, that's what I want you to get at. Two, the second thing I want you to get is, as you think about how you're being shortchanged, really, how you're being ripped off and nobody's listening to you, how you have absolutely no voice in this game, I want to ask you to have compassion for those who put their own interests before yours. It's easy to get angry and resent all the irresponsibility and mismanagement of bureaucracy. But let's remind ourselves that the same tendencies, the same incentives and instincts exist in us. The other is merely a mirror reflecting to us what we carry within. This doesn't justify what they're doing morally, but it does transcend us from playing a game of blame to taking a practical lesson to improve ourselves. All right. If the other side has a limited view, let us learn from that and not fall for the same limitation and rigidity. Even if they're intentionally irresponsible and insensitive, that's exactly why they deserve compassion. And even in that, they are a reflecting mirror. All right. So in a way, in this strike, your teachers are still giving you a test, not the usual kind of test, but as important nevertheless, right? So we chip in what we have and keep up our hopes. Whatever is the result, there's something to learn.